It was 6:02 on a Tuesday morning when the sound of a zipper closing ripped through the silence of our master bedroom and, simultaneously, tore my life in two. There were no screams. There were no plates being thrown against the wall. Just the cold, metallic sound of that Italian leather suitcase, a suitcase that, ironically, I had bought for him last Christmas, being shut with a terrifying finality. I sat up in bed, the bitter taste of sleep still in my mouth, staring at Caleb. He was already dressed, navy blue suit, impeccable cut, silver cufflinks, hair perfectly slicked back. He looked like an award-winning architect about to present a skyscraper project. He didn't look like a man about to destroy his wife of 5 years. "Caleb?" My voice came out weak, a small, pathetic thing in the freezing air conditioning. "What's going on? Do you have a business trip you forgot to tell me about?" He turned around. The expression on his face wasn't sadness. It wasn't even guilt. It was pity. That kind of condescending pity one has for a pet that just can't learn a new trick. "It's not a trip, Elena," he said, checking the Rolex Submariner on his wrist. "Another gift from me. I'm leaving." The air vanished from my lungs. It was physical. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "What? What do you mean?" We had dinner last night. We watched a movie. We laughed." "Caleb, what are you talking about?" He sighed. That long, theatrical sigh he used when an intern at his office made a basic mistake. He walked to the edge of the bed, but he didn't sit down. He wanted to keep the height advantage. He wanted to look down on me. "Elena, look at us." He gestured, pointing first to himself, then to me, huddled in my old flannel pajamas. "The reality is that we've evolved at different paces. I'm entering a new phase of my career. The Civic Center project, the connections with Bianca and Nolan's group. I need a partner who understands that world, someone who has ambition." I blinked, trying to process the words. "Ambition? You're leaving me because you think I don't have ambition?" I asked, confusion giving way to sharp pain. "It's not just that," he said, softening his voice into a fake therapist tone. "You're a sweet woman, Elena. You are comfortable. But let's be honest, you're unremarkable. You're happy with your domestic life, with your small routines. And there's nothing wrong with that, for you. But me? I was made for more. I need someone who challenges me, someone who has their own empire, not someone who just exists in the shadow of my success." My hands, hidden under the Egyptian silk duvet, began to tremble, not from sadness, but from a sudden, violent adrenaline, shadow of his success. He didn't know. God, he had no idea. In that moment, the urge to scream the truth burned my throat like acid. I wanted to jump out of bed, grab my phone, and open my banking app in his face. I wanted to say, "Caleb, you arrogant idiot. Last night, while you slept thinking you were the king of the world, the wire transfer cleared. My company, Vance Wu, which I built from scratch over the last 3 years operating in the shadows, was just sold to a tech conglomerate for $21 million. I wanted to say, "This apartment? I paid the down payment. The rent for your fancy office downtown? That came from my private investment account. The car, the trips, the $500 wines you drink with Bianca and Nolan, all funded by me through that joint account I mysteriously kept topped up." But I said nothing. My mouth snapped shut, because in that second, his phone buzzed in his suit pocket. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and a complicit smile appeared. He rejected the call, but not before I saw the name glow. Bianca. "I'll be staying at the Four Seasons for a few days while my lawyers prepare the paperwork," he said, grabbing the suitcase. "I'll be generous, Elena. I'll let you stay here in the apartment until the end of the month. After that, well, Nolan thinks we can sell this place fast. The market is hot. He thought the apartment was his. He thought the money was his. He thought I was a disposable extra in the biopic of his life." "Goodbye, Elena," he said, turning his back. I hope you find someone on your level." The front door slammed. I sat in the deafening silence. I looked at the digital clock, 6:08 a.m. In 6 minutes, my husband of 5 years destroyed our marriage, called me mediocre, announced he was selling my home, and left to meet the woman who was probably already waiting for him. I got up and walked to the window. I saw Caleb leaving the building, getting into a black Uber. He looked light. He looked free. My reflection in the glass showed a small, disheveled woman with dark circles under her eyes. But as I stared, something changed in my eyes. The tears dried before they fell. The shaking in my hands stopped. He said he wanted someone with an empire. He said I had no ambition. I picked up my phone. I opened my bank balance. $21,450,000. A cold smile, one I didn't recognize, formed on my face. "You want a war, Caleb?" I whispered to the empty room. "Then you're going to get a nuclear war." I wasn't just going to sign the divorce papers. I was going to dismantle his life, brick by golden brick, until nothing was left but the dust of his own arrogance. He wanted an unforgettable woman. I was about to become the most unforgettable thing that ever happened to him. Before we continue with this story of calculated revenge, I have a quick request. Please, write in the comments below which country you are watching from. It's amazing to see how far our stories reach. And if you, like me, love seeing justice served against arrogant people who think they can step on others, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Your support is the fuel that helps us bring you more narratives like this one. Ready? Let's go back. Believe me, what Caleb did next makes the breakup look like an act of mercy. For you to understand how I let such a mediocre man believe he was a god, I need to take you back to the beginning. I need you to understand the perfect lie I built. It all started 5 years ago, in a pretentious art gallery downtown. I had just left an exhausting job in corporate cybersecurity. I was tired of men in suits shouting orders, tired of office politics, tired of being the smartest person in the room and having to pretend I wasn't so I wouldn't bruise my bosses' fragile egos. That was when I saw Caleb. He was standing in front of an abstract painting, gesturing passionately. He was handsome, charismatic, and spoke about negative space and architectural flow with a passion that disarmed me. When he looked at me, he didn't see the exhausted data analyst. He saw a muse. "This painting is chaos," he said, smiling at me. "But you look like the only calm thing in this place." The romance was a whirlwind. Caleb was a junior architect at the time, full of dreams but with little money. I, on the other hand, was about to take the biggest step of my life. 2 weeks after we started dating, my partner, David Wu, a reclusive programming genius, and I founded Vance Wu Crisis Management. Our premise was simple and dangerous. We cleaned up digital disasters for the Silicon Valley elite, CEOs being blackmailed, embarrassing data leaks, security flaws before IPOs. We solved problems that couldn't officially exist. The job required absolute secrecy. I couldn't be Elena Vance, powerful CEO. I had to be a ghost. So, when Caleb and I moved in together, I made a decision that would seal my fate. I wanted a sanctuary. I wanted to come home and not talk about hackers, blackmail, or millions of dollars. I just wanted to be Elena. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I could buy or fix. I created a persona for Caleb. I told him I worked with remote file consulting and technical translation freelancing. A boring, low-paying, but stable job. "Don't worry about the bills, darling," Caleb said the day we moved into that cramped apartment. "I'll be the provider. I'm going to build our future." I thought it was romantic at the time. I didn't see the seed of control. As Vance Wu took off, the money started pouring in, rivers of money. But Caleb was struggling. His firm didn't recognize his talent. He was frustrated, in debt. I couldn't watch him suffer. So I started helping. But invisibly, I created a complex financial structure. I opened a joint account where I deposited fictitious bonuses from my job or small inheritances from a distant aunt. I paid the bigger bills discreetly. When he wanted to open his own architecture firm, I used a shell company to be the anonymous angel investor who funded his dream. He would come home beaming. They saw my potential, Elena. This investor knows I'm a visionary. I would smile, serving dinner, swallowing the fact that I was the investor. I was paying his office rent. I was paying his secretary's salary. He started winning local awards in contests that had expensive entry fees, which I paid. He started getting invited to exclusive parties. And it was at those parties that he met Bianca and Nolan. Bianca, a real estate heir who never worked a day in her life. And Nolan, a venture capitalist with a shark's smile. They loved Caleb. He was the new talent, the self-made architect. But they looked me up and down. To them, I was the simple wife, the freelancer who wore modest clothes and didn't understand French wines. "Caleb is amazing," Bianca said once, at a dinner, while I was sitting right next to her. "It's a shame not everyone has the same drive as him." Caleb laughed. He didn't defend me. He laughed and toasted with her. That was the first red flag I ignored. I was blinded by love, blinded by my own lie. I thought I was protecting his ego, building his confidence, but I wasn't raising a confident husband. I was feeding a monster who learned to love the lifestyle I paid for, while despising the woman who signed the checks. And now, back to that cold Tuesday morning, the monster had just bitten the hand that fed him. As I stared at the $21 million bank balance, my phone rang. It was David Wu, my partner. "Elena." His voice was tense. "Congratulations on the sale. The money landed. But we have a problem. One of our security sweep algorithms picked up an anomaly on your husband's personal server." I froze. I monitored Caleb's digital security as an extension of my own to protect him. "What is it, David?" "He's not just leaving you, Elena. I'm seeing encrypted email exchanges between him, Bianca's family lawyer, and a forensic accountant. They don't just want a divorce." David paused, and the silence on the line was heavier than lead. "They are trying to prove you have illicit hidden income to try and extort lifetime alimony from you based on fraud, or worse. They are planning to use your name to cover up an embezzlement Caleb committed on the Civic Center project." The sadness vanished completely. The shock disappeared. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and wiped my face. The vulnerable woman in pajamas had vanished. In her place stood the CEO of Vance Wu Crisis Management, the woman who made blackmailers cry. "David," I said, my voice now icy and precise as a scalpel. "Don't block his access yet. Let him think he's safe. Send me everything you have." Caleb wanted to play who's smarter. He thought I was the naive wife. Little did he know. The game had just begun, and I had the marked cards. I hung up the phone with David and stood in the middle of the bedroom, feeling the silence of the apartment transform. What was once an empty, sad home now felt like a command center. The sticky sadness of abandonment had evaporated, replaced by a cold, metallic clarity. Caleb made the classic rookie mistake. He underestimated his opponent. He looked at me for 5 years and saw only flannel clothes and home-cooked dinners. He didn't see the mind that designed defense protocols for Swiss banks. He didn't see the woman who once tracked a hacker to a basement in Kiev using only power consumption patterns. He wanted a war. He was about to get a masterclass. I walked to my closet, not to cry over the shirts he left behind, but to reach for the false bottom of my sock drawer. I pulled out a thin, matte black briefcase. Inside, there were no jewels or love letters. There was my main laptop, custom hardware that never connected to the home Wi-Fi, and 3 encrypted hard drives. I sat in the velvet armchair where Caleb used to read his architecture magazines and opened the laptop. The screen came to life with lines of green and black code. "Hello, David," I said into the mic, Activating our secure channel. I'm in. Show me the dirt. David's voice came through the speakers, without the hesitation from before. Now we were in work mode. It's worse than we thought, Elena. I tracked his digital footprint over the last 6 months. Caleb isn't just being unfaithful. He is building a forensic narrative to frame you. Look at your screen. Windows started popping up on my monitor. They were copies of emails, bank statements, and PDF documents. My eyes scanned the information, processing the data faster than I could feel the anger. He set up a shell consulting firm in your name, Elena, David explained. Called EV Design Solutions. He used your old info, your social security number, he even forged your digital signature. And guess what? This company has been billing consulting services to the Civic Center project he is managing. How much? I asked, my voice low. $2.5 million so far. He is siphoning funds from the public project, funneling it to this fake company in your name, and then moving the money to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. But here is the brilliant and evil part. The Cayman accounts are under an anonymous holding company, but the trail of embezzlement points directly to you. I tasted metal in my mouth. Caleb wasn't just stealing. He was stealing and leaving breadcrumbs leading to my door. If an audit happened, it would look like the architect's greedy wife was using her husband's influence to charge for non-existent services. He's going to plead ignorance, I muttered, connecting the dots. He's going to say I managed the household finances, that I manipulated him. He's going to play the victim, the artist betrayed by his criminal wife, and with the divorce, he gets rid of me and keeps the clean money in the Caymans. Exactly, David confirmed. And there is a deadline, Elena. The Civic Center system is scheduled for an automatic annual tax audit next Monday morning. He needs to get rid of you and discover the fraud before then to save himself. He's going to report you. He probably plans to do it this weekend. I looked at the calendar in the corner of the screen. Today was Tuesday. Caleb's 35th birthday was on Saturday. The dinner at L'Etoile. Of course, it would be the perfect stage. He would be surrounded by Bianca, Nolan, and all the elite. He would make a toast, maybe pretend to find something on his phone, cause a scene. He would walk out as the tragic hero, and I would walk out in handcuffs or, at the very least, socially destroyed and under federal investigation. We have 4 days, I said. 4 days to flip the script. David, I need to know where the money went. If it's in the Caymans, who are the signatories? I'm trying to crack the bank's encryption, but it's military grade. Whoever helped Caleb set this up knew what they were doing. It wasn't him. Caleb barely knows how to convert a PDF. It was Nolan, I said, with absolute certainty. Nolan works with venture capital and emerging markets. He knows tax havens. And Bianca, her family has real estate connections. They are using Caleb as a frontman, and Caleb is using me as a scapegoat. It's an ecosystem of parasites. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline sharpen my senses. I needed physical proof. Digital was good, but I needed something that linked Caleb to the intent of the crime, not just the execution. I needed to hear his voice planning this. I needed to see his arrogance crumble. Where is he now? I asked. His car's GPS indicates he just arrived at the Four Seasons. He's probably meeting Bianca for breakfast to celebrate his freedom. Great. Is his office empty? His secretary arrives at 9 a.m. You have a 45-minute window. I closed the laptop. I'm going there. Keep monitoring the accounts. If he moves a cent, I want to know. I got dressed quickly. No pajamas, no sad wife. I put on a structured black pantsuit, heels that made an authoritative sound against the floor, and sunglasses. I grabbed my purse, slipping in a device that looked like a common USB drive but was actually a rubber ducky. A keystroke injection tool that could copy saved passwords in seconds once plugged in. I went down to the garage. My car, a secure and discreet SUV, was there. But my eyes landed on Caleb's car, which he had left behind because he took an Uber, a Porsche Cayenne that I paid for. The spare key was in my bag. No, I thought. Focus. The office is the priority. I drove downtown, my hands steady on the wheel. Morning traffic was heavy, but my mind was racing faster than the cars. I replayed every interaction I had with Caleb over the last few months. Every time he asked about how tax stuff works. Every time he asked me to sign some document without reading it because it was boring insurance stuff. I was so blind. I mistook exploitation for partnership. I parked 2 blocks from his architecture firm. The building was modern, glass and steel, a facade of success for a business that was bleeding money until I stepped in. I used my boss's wife badge to get past lobby security. The guard, Mr. Henderson, smiled at me. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance. In early today, Mr. Caleb just left." "I know, Mr. Henderson," I smiled back, the fakest smile of my life. He forgot some important documents for the Civic Center meeting. I just came to pick them up and run them over to him. Dedicated wife, right? For sure. Have a good day. The elevator rose smoothly. My heart beat in a steady, controlled rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Caleb's office door was locked, but I had the key. I entered. His scent was still there. Sandalwood and expensive coffee. The office was a monument to his ego. Awards on the shelf, illuminated scale models, and in the center, his pristine glass desk. I walked over. The computer was off, but that didn't matter. I didn't need his files. I needed his environment. I started searching. Drawers. Nothing but pens and mints, cabinets, legitimate blueprints and contracts. Where would you hide your secrets, Caleb? You are arrogant, but you aren't stupid enough to leave the fraud contract on the desk. I looked around. There was a frame on the wall, a picture of us on our wedding day. He was smiling, hand on my waist. I looked so young, so hopeful. The irony hit me. Did he look at that photo every day while stealing from me? No, he didn't look. To him, it was furniture. But then, something caught my eye. The bookshelf behind the desk. All the architecture books were organized by color and size, except one. A thick volume on History of Modern Urbanism. The spine was slightly more worn than the others, and it was out of alignment by millimeters. Caleb was obsessive about alignment. That wasn't carelessness, it was frequent use. I pulled the book. It was heavy. I opened the cover. The inside had been hollowed out. Inside, nestled in the hole, was a burner phone and a small black leather notebook. Bingo. I picked up the notebook. My hands, gloved to avoid leaving prints, flipped through the pages. Not drawings. Numbers, dates, and lists. A list titled Exit Plan. 1. Asset Transfer. Complete. 2. EV Design. Frame-up. Set. 3. Social Isolation. Bianca handling this. In progress. 4. The Announcement. L'Etoile. Saturday. And below that, a note written in his rushed handwriting that made my blood run cold. Make sure she doesn't have access to expensive lawyers. Freeze joint accounts on Friday. Nolan suggested claiming mental instability if she reacts too badly. Mental instability. They wanted to paint me as crazy. They wanted to take my voice, my credibility, and my freedom. I picked up the burner phone. It was off. I turned it on. The battery was low, but it worked. There was only one number saved in the contacts. Bianca. I went to the messages. The last message sent last night at 11:30 p.m. while I was sleeping next to him. It's done. The idiot suspects nothing. I'll miss her money, but not the boring conversation. Can't wait to be in Paris on Monday with our clean share. Paris. They were going to run away to Paris with the money stolen from the public project, leaving me to face the FBI. I took photos of every page of the notebook and every message on the phone with my own phone. I put everything back exactly as I found it, the book on the shelf, misaligned by a millimeter. I left the office 3 minutes before the secretary arrived. As I rode the elevator down, The transformation was complete. The Elena who wanted to save the marriage was dead and buried. The Elena who walked out of that building was an apex predator. They had a plan for Saturday. They thought the dinner at L'Etoile would be my public execution. Poor souls. They didn't know they had just invited me to my own show. I picked up my phone and dialed David. "David," I said, getting into the car. "Forget the defense. We are going on the offensive. I want you to buy the L'Etoile restaurant." "What?" David gasped. "The whole restaurant?" "Yes, through one of our holding companies. I want to own the place where he's going to try to destroy me. And I want you to install microphones and cameras at every table, especially table 4, his favorite. We're going to turn his birthday dinner into a reality show he will never forget. Oh, and David, find out everything about Bianca. If she has a skeleton in her closet, I want to see it dance." The car engine roared. The clock was ticking. 4 days to the dinner, 4 days to prepare the perfect trap. Caleb wanted an ambitious woman. He was about to meet the ambition of a woman who had $21 million and nothing to lose. I drove away from Caleb's office with my heart slowing down, but my mind sharpening like a freshly forged blade. The midday sun hit the windshield, illuminating the city my husband believed he was about to conquer, unaware that the ground beneath his feet was already mine. David sent me an encrypted message. "L'Etoile acquisition approved. We are majority owners, effective immediately. The manager is panicking but cooperating. The tech team goes in tonight to install surveillance." I smiled. The stage was set. But before the final act on Saturday, I needed to neutralize the secondary players. I needed to figure out Bianca. Why would a wealthy heiress get involved in a dirty, risky, public embezzlement scheme? The answer came faster than I expected, in the form of a phone ring. The name Bianca glowed on the car dashboard. I took a deep breath, channeling my best version of devastated wife. I answered, "Elena." Her voice was a sweet, cloying syrup. "Caleb told me what happened." "Oh, honey, I am so shocked. I had no idea." "Bianca," my voice trembled, an Oscar-worthy performance. "I don't know what to do. He just left." "Shh, calm down. Listen, you shouldn't be alone right now. Meet me for lunch at the garden in 30 minutes. Let's talk. My treat. Of course, I am the wounded prey, and she is the vulture coming to see if I've stopped breathing yet." "Thank you, Bianca." "You are a true friend," I replied, suppressing the urge to vomit. I swerved the car. The garden was the kind of place where a salad cost $40 and gossip cost reputations. I parked far away so she wouldn't see that I wasn't crying behind the wheel. Before getting out, I placed a tiny lapel microphone hidden under the collar of my blouse, connected to my digital recorder in my inner pocket. I also placed a nearly invisible earpiece in my right ear, connected directly to David. "I'm listening, Elena," David said in my ear. "While you have lunch with the snake, I'm going to do a deep sweep of her finances. Something tells me the heiress isn't as rich as she claims." I entered the restaurant. Bianca was seated at the best table, of course, sipping a mimosa. She wore an impeccable white dress designed to highlight her manufactured purity. When she saw me, she made a face of performative sadness that would have fooled anyone but me. "Oh, Elena," she stood up and gave me a loose hug, without touching her body to mine, as if my poverty were contagious. "Sit down. You look terrible, dear. Those dark circles." I sat down, slumping my shoulders, looking at the table. "I haven't slept at all. I don't understand, Bianca. We were happy. What did I do wrong?" "It wasn't what you did. It was what you are," she said, pouring herself more mimosa. "Caleb is a special man. He needs space, brilliance, domestic life, suffocates men like him. And frankly, Elena, you never tried very hard to fit into our circle. Did you? The simple clothes, the lack of conversation about investments. You bored him." I squeezed the napkin under the table. She was rewriting history right in front of me. He said I had no ambition, I whispered. And is he wrong? She smiled, but her eyes were cold. Look at you. You settle for so little. Caleb deserves the world. But don't worry, the divorce will be quick. Nolan told me they are going to offer a fair settlement. Take the money, Elena. Move to a smaller town. Start over. It will be better for everyone. David spoke in my ear, his voice cutting. Elena, bingo. I just accessed Bianca's credit reports. She's broke. The family trust fund dried up 2 years ago due to her father's bad investments. She has overdue mortgages on her penthouse and her car. She is living on revolving credit cards. She needs this civic center scam just as much as Caleb does. The revelation hit me like lightning. She wasn't helping Caleb because she admired him. She was using Caleb. He was the mule carrying the risk, and she was the leech waiting for the payout. If the scheme blew up, Caleb would fall, and she would claim innocence. Do you think I should take the deal? I asked, looking up, letting a fake tear roll down. Without lawyers? Lawyers are expensive and complicated, she said quickly, a tone of urgency leaking into her calm voice. They will only prolong your pain. Sign whatever Caleb gives you on Friday. Trust me. It's the best advice I can give you. Friday, I asked. Caleb's notebook said to freeze the accounts on Friday. Yes, to get this sorted before his birthday on Saturday. It would be a gift for him, don't you think? To be free? I took a sip of water to hide my predatory smile. You're right, Bianca. I just want this to be over. Great, she signaled the waiter for the check. I knew you would be reasonable. Oh, and Elena, Nolan asked me to tell you, if you try to fight, he knows things about your past. Things about emotional instability. It would be ugly if that came out in public. A veiled threat. They really thought I was a fragile woman. Little did they know that emotional instability was the least of their worries. Their biggest worry should be the woman who was recording every word of that extortion. I left the lunch feeling dirty, but victorious. I had her implied confession, the financial motivation, and the confirmation of the deadline. But as I got into the car, David's voice returned, urgent. Elena, get out of there now and go home, but don't go in through the front door. What is it? I asked, starting the engine. Your house security system. I saw an access log at 10 a.m. Someone used Caleb's passcode to enter, and they stayed inside for 12 minutes. Did Caleb go back home? It wasn't Caleb. His GPS is still at the office. It was someone else. And from the street cameras, it looks like a man with Nolan's build. He went in with a full backpack and came out with it empty. Elena, they aren't waiting for the weekend to frame you. They've already planted the proof. My blood ran cold. What did they plant, David? I don't know. But considering they want to paint you as unstable or criminal to invalidate any defense you might have, it could be anything. Drugs, stolen cash, forged documents. You need to find it before they send the police for an anonymous visit. I slammed on the gas. Traffic seemed to move in slow motion. The cold anger gave way to a calculated fear. If the police knocked on my door and found evidence of the Civic Center embezzlement hidden in my apartment, my credibility would be destroyed. I would be taken into custody, and in jail, I couldn't execute my plan for Saturday. I needed to get home. I needed to sweep my own sanctuary. I arrived at my building in record time. I went up the service elevator. I entered the apartment silently. Everything looked normal. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust dancing in the air. But the energy was wrong. Someone had been there. Someone had violated my space. I started searching. Nolan wouldn't hide it in obvious places. He was smart. I went to the office I used for my freelance translation. I searched the drawers. Nothing. I went to the guest room. Nothing. Then I went to the kitchen. I looked at the high cabinets. Nothing. Where? Where would I never look? Where would the police look first in a fraud search? The air vent. In the pantry, there was a vent grate near the floor. I noticed a tiny scratch on the bottom screw. The paint was chipped. Nolan used a screwdriver there recently. I ran to the pantry. I grabbed a butter knife since I didn't have time to get tools. I unscrewed the grate with shaking hands. I pulled off the metal cover. Inside, in the dark and dust, was a brown package sealed with duct tape. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I tore the corner. $100 bills, stacks of them. And underneath the money, a blue folder. I opened the folder. They were forged bank statements from the Cayman Islands Bank, all with my name and my forged signature, dated months back. And worst of all, printed, forged emails where I instructed Caleb to siphon the money to pay my gambling debts. It was the complete frame-up kit. They were going to arrest me for money laundering and fraud, and the story would be perfect. The gambling-addicted wife who corrupted the architect husband. I heard sirens in the distance. The sound grew, getting closer to the building. They weren't going to wait. The anonymous tip had already been made. Nolan was fast. "David," I whispered into my earpiece. "I found it. It's money and fake documents, and the police are 2 minutes away." "Get out of there, Elena," David shouted. "No, I can't leave with this in my hand. They might catch me in the lobby, and I can't leave it here." "What are you going to do?" I looked at the industrial paper shredder I had in the office, a luxury of my secret life as a corporate spy that Caleb never questioned. And I looked at the gas fireplace in the living room. "I'm going to do what I do best, David. I'm going to manage the crisis. But they just made a fatal mistake. They brought the murder weapon into my house. And now I have Nolan's fingerprints on the package." The sirens stopped in front of the building. I had about 3 minutes before they knocked on the door. The chess game had just turned into a boxing match, and I wasn't about to hit the floor. The sound of sirens ceased abruptly in front of the building, replaced by the heavy slamming of car doors and authoritative voices on the intercom. I had 180 seconds. The panicked human mind freezes. The crisis-trained mind accelerates. I ran to the fireplace. I turned the gas up to maximum. With hands still gloved, I tore open the blue folder and threw the forged bank statements and incriminating emails into the flames. The paper caught fire instantly, the black letters telling the story of my ruin curling up and turning into gray ash. As the fire devoured the lies, I grabbed the stack of cash, $100,000 in untraceable bills. I couldn't burn it fast enough, and throwing it in the trash was too risky. I looked at the kitchen, the freezer. I opened the door, pulled out a large bag of frozen vegetables that was at the bottom, old and covered in ice. I opened the bag, shoved the money, now inside an airtight Ziploc bag, into the middle of the peas, and resealed it with the heat of a lighter to look untouched. I threw the bag back to the bottom of the freezer, behind boxes of ice cream and meats. I hid the pantry vent grate again, tightening the screw with the butter knife, ensuring the scratch Nolan made was facing down, invisible. I ran to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, messed up my hair to look like I had been sleeping or crying, and put on a fluffy robe over my spy clothes. When the doorbell rang, followed by heavy pounding, "Police, open up!" I was already in the living room, with red eyes and a cup of tea in my hand. I opened the door. 4 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit entered like a storm. The detective, a man named Miller with eyes that had seen the worst of humanity and didn't like it, showed me a warrant. "Mrs. Vance, we have a credible anonymous tip that there are proceeds of illicit activity in this apartment. We need to search. Step aside." "What?" My voice came out shaky. "Perfect. Illicit. I don't understand. My husband just left the house. I'm alone." Miller didn't hear me. He signaled the officers, and, confirming David's theory, they didn't do a random sweep. 2 of them went straight to the kitchen, straight to the pantry. I held my breath, my heart beating against my ribs like a trapped bird. I saw the officer kneel. I saw him shine his flashlight on the vent grate. He ran his hand over the grate. He pulled. It was firm. He looked through the slats. Just dust and darkness. He turned to Miller and shook his head. "Nothing here, sir." Miller frowned. His certainty wavered. "Check the office," he growled. They ransacked my drawers. They looked under the mattress. They opened the safe, which was empty except for passports. But they didn't look inside a bag of frozen peas from 3 years ago. 20 minutes later, the storm passed. The apartment was overturned, but I was clean. Miller stopped at the door before leaving, visibly frustrated. Nolan's tip had been too specific, and the failure made him look incompetent. "Sorry for the disturbance, Mrs. Vance," he said, not really meaning it. "If your husband gets in touch, let us know." "Why would I?" I asked, innocent. "Did he do something wrong?" Miller didn't answer. The door closed. As soon as the lock turned, I let out the air I didn't even know I was holding. My legs gave way, and I slid to the floor, but I didn't stay there. I got up and went to the window. I saw the squad cars pulling away. And then I grabbed my secure phone. "David," I said, "they're gone. Their plan failed." "Thank God," David sighed. "Elena, this changes everything. Nolan is going to panic. He was sure you'd be in handcuffs by now. When he realizes you weren't arrested, he's going to think you found the money and will use it against them, or that you are more dangerous than he thought." "Let's let him sweat," I said, a cold smile returning. "But now it's my turn to visit Nolan. What did you find out about him?" "Nolan Pierce, venture capitalist. Apparently a genius, but actually an adrenaline junkie. He has massive gambling debts in Macau, and he has a secret kept on a private server in his office. He keeps insurance recordings of all his business partners. Blackmail," I concluded. "He records partners committing crimes to ensure no one betrays him." "Exactly. If he's working with Caleb on the Civic Center embezzlement, he has a recording of Caleb confessing or planning the crime. He has to. It's his life insurance. I need that recording," I said. "If I have the audio of Caleb admitting to the theft, I not only save myself, but I bury them both at once. Nolan's office is a fortress. Elena. Biometrics, armed guards. It's not like Caleb's architecture firm." "I don't need to physically enter the server," I reminded him, looking at my purse where the rubber ducky rested. "I just need to plug this into any computer on his internal network for 5 seconds. The script will do the rest and open a back door for you. But how do I get in there?" David laughed, a dry sound. "You are the abandoned and unstable wife, remember? Nolan is your husband's best friend. Go cry on his shoulder. Make a scene. He'll love seeing you humiliated. He'll lower his guard. It was risky, walking into the wolf's den while he was still trying to figure out why the trap didn't snap. But time was running out. Wednesday, 3 days left. I'm going to Pierce Capital. I decided. I changed clothes again. This time, something conservative but slightly disheveled. Makeup smudged on purpose. I needed to sell the image of defeat. I drove to the financial district. Nolan's building was imposing, black marble and gold glass. I went up to the reception. The secretary looked at me with disdain. "Mrs. Vance? Mr. Pierce is in a meeting?" "Please," I begged, my voice choked. "I just need to talk to someone. Caleb won't answer me." Bianca told me to take the deal, but I'm so confused." The secretary buzzed him. Seconds later, the double oak doors opened. Nolan appeared. He was tall, artificially tanned, with teeth too white. He smiled when he saw me, but his eyes swept my body looking for invisible handcuffs. He was confused. "Elena?" He opened his arms. "What are you doing here? I thought you would be busy." "Busy?" I sniffled. "I'm alone, Nolan. The police. They came to the house. They ransacked everything. It was horrible." Nolan's eyes lit up. "The police? And what did they find?" "Nothing," I screamed, hysterical. "Because there was nothing. Why would they do this to me?" Nolan froze. The smile wavered for a millisecond. Nothing, he must have thought. Where is the money I planted? Come into my office, he said, grabbing my arm with unnecessary firmness. Let's talk, let's figure this out. He guided me inside. The office was vast, overlooking the bay. He sat me on the sofa and went to the bar to fix a drink. Whiskey. To calm the nerves. Yes, please, I accepted. While his back was turned, messing with the crystal, I acted. His computer was on the desk, facing the window. I stood up, pretending to be dizzy and walking aimlessly around the room. I don't know what to do with my life, Nolan. I sobbed, approaching the desk. Caleb was everything to me. Nolan turned around, glass in hand. I know, darling, I know. I froze, leaning on the desk as if I were going to faint. My left hand, hidden by my body, slid to the side USB port of his monitor. The rubber ducky slipped from my sleeve into the slot. Click. A tiny light blinked once. The script was running, injecting the code, opening the door for David. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. I pulled the device back into my sleeve. Are you okay? Nolan asked, approaching with the drink. I took the glass, my hands shaking, but now from pure victorious adrenaline. I think I just need a friend. Nolan smiled, that shark smile. He thought he was consoling me before the slaughter. He didn't know I had just infected the digital brain of his operation. Drink, Elena. It will pass. It will all be over soon. He was right. It would all be over soon, just not the way he imagined. I drank the whiskey in one gulp. It tasted expensive and bitter, like revenge. Now, David had access. Now, we were going to find the recording. And then, Caleb wouldn't just be a cheating husband, he would be a confessed criminal in 4K audio. I left Nolan's building 30 minutes later, thanking him profusely. As soon as I got into my car, I locked the doors and took a deep breath. David, I asked. I'm in. His voice sounded triumphant. I'm downloading everything. And Elena? You were right. There is a folder called Caleb Insurance. The audio file is 45 minutes long. It's the meeting where they planned the embezzlement. I have his voice, Elena. I have the smoking gun. I leaned my head back against the seat. Hot tears, real ones this time, streamed down. Not of sadness, but of relief and fury. I had the proof. Now, I didn't just need to defend myself. Now, I could destroy Saturday's dinner with the precision of an airstrike. The game had changed. The hunter became the hunted. And the countdown to L'Etoile continued. Tick-tock, Caleb, tick-tock. Thursday dawned gray, the sky reflecting the color of my soul. I had the recording. I had the smoking gun. But David Wu, being the paranoid perfectionist that he was, didn't stop digging. He spent the entire night analyzing the terabytes of data we stole from Nolan's server. When he called me at 8 a.m., his voice didn't have the triumphant tone from yesterday. It sounded scared. Elena, don't go to the office today. Sit down. We need to talk about Project Alpha. What is Project Alpha? I asked, holding my coffee mug with both hands to stop the trembling that had persisted since the police raid. It was the name of the hidden folder inside the hidden folder on Nolan's server. Elena, I listened to the entire 45-minute audio. At minute 32, after they finish laughing about how they're going to frame you with the money in the pantry, Caleb says something. He says, I hope Elena isn't as complicated as Anna. That girl almost ruined everything when she found out about the accounts in Belize. I froze. Anna. Caleb never mentioned an Anna. He told me I was his first serious relationship since college. Who is Anna? I asked. I used facial recognition software on old photos of Caleb, cross-referencing with obituary databases and police news from other states. I found a case in Seattle, 6 years ago. A woman named Anna Klein. a talented graphic designer. She was engaged to a man named Cole Bennett. David sent a photo to my tablet. The screen lit up the dark bedroom. Anna was beautiful, blonde, with a radiant smile, and next to her, hugging her possessively, was Cole Bennett. He had longer hair, stubble, and thick-rimmed glasses. But the eyes, they were Caleb's eyes. The jaw was Caleb's. It was my husband, 6 years younger, using another name. "What happened to her, David?" I asked, though I already felt the nausea rising. Cole Bennett disappeared 2 weeks before the wedding. Anna discovered that her savings accounts, her inheritance, and her parents' retirement fund had been drained. Cole, or Caleb, had wiped everything. About $800,000. Anna tried to go to the police, but he left no digital footprints at the time. He used her identity to take out loans. She was left with millions in debt. And where is she now? David's silence was deafening. She committed suicide, Elena. 3 months after he left, she jumped off the Aurora Bridge. She left a note saying she couldn't live with the shame of destroying her parents' lives. The tablet slipped from my hands and fell onto the muffled rug. The world spun. Caleb wasn't just a cheating husband. He wasn't just an opportunistic thief. He was a serial predator, an indirect murderer. He had done this before. He found Anna, seduced her, drained her, and discarded her like trash, driving her to death. And I was Project Beta. I was the next Anna. The only difference was that Anna didn't have Vance Wu crisis management. Anna didn't have $21 million and a team of hackers. The tears I didn't cry for the end of my marriage fell now for Anna Klein, a woman I never met, but whose pain I felt in my veins. The sadness transformed, instantly, into pure, distilled, volcanic hatred. Caleb wasn't just going to jail for fraud. I was going to destroy his soul. I was going to make him wish he had never been born. David. My voice was a hoarse whisper. I want everything on the Anna case. Photos, the police report, the suicide note, everything. For what, Elena? For the dinner. I'm going to introduce Caleb to his ghosts. Friday arrived with a sinister calm. It was D-Day before the grand finale. Caleb came to the apartment at 2 p.m., as promised, to bring the divorce papers. I was waiting. I had rehearsed this scene in my head 1,000 times. When he walked in, he looked irritated, checking his watch, as if being in the presence of the woman he vowed to love was a waste of precious time. Here it is. He tossed a manila envelope onto the coffee table. My lawyer drafted everything. It's a standard agreement. You keep the car I paid for, and I keep the company investments, the company I funded. Sign on the last page. I picked up the envelope. My hands were shaking, and this time I didn't need to pretend. I was shaking with the urge to jam a pen into his jugular, but I held back. I needed him to feel victorious. I needed him to lower his guard completely for tomorrow. Caleb, I started, voice low. Are you sure about this? Can't we try therapy? He laughed, a dry, cruel laugh. Elena, please, have some dignity. It's over. I've outgrown you. Just sign and make things easy. If you complicate this, Nolan and the lawyers will turn your life into hell. They'll question your sanity. Do you want that? He was using the thread I saw in the notebook. He was following the script. No, I said, defeated. I don't want to fight. I grabbed the pen. I signed my name on the dotted line. The signature was shaky. I handed the paper to him. He smiled, tucking the document into his briefcase like it was a trophy. Good girl, see? That wasn't so hard. He walked to the door but stopped. Oh, about tomorrow. The dinner at L'Etoile. I know it's awkward, but Bianca insisted you come. As a gesture of mature closure. She thinks it would be good for our social image to show we are civilized. I knew what that was. It wasn't maturity. It was sadism. Bianca wanted to parade me around like a slaughtered animal. She wanted to rub the victory in my face in front of the city's elite. They wanted me there to witness their triumph, Little did they know they were inviting me to light the fuse. "I'll go," I said, looking at the floor. "If it's important to you, Caleb, I'll go." "Great. Be there at 8 p.m. And try to dress better. It's a classy place." He left, slamming the door. I stood alone in the silence. I walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at the good girl who signed the papers. She was smiling, a terrible smile. "Try to dress better," I repeated his words. "Oh, Caleb, you have no idea." I went to my secret closet, the one locked at the back of the guest wardrobe. I pulled the protective cover off a dress I had bought in Paris on a secret business trip 2 years ago. It was a blood-red dress, pure silk, cut to kill. A dress that domestic wife Elena would never wear. A dress worthy of a black widow. David sent me a message. L'Etoile's sound system is hacked. The projection screens they were going to use for his birthday photo retrospect are under our control. The waiters are actually 2 ex-Secret Service agents who owe me favors. We are ready, I replied. And the special guest? David. Arrives tomorrow morning. Anna's mother. She cried when I told her we got him. She wants to be there. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Justice was coming. It wouldn't just be a financial scandal. It would be a moral reckoning. I went to bed early that Friday, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the city breathe, visualizing every second of the following night. I saw Caleb's face when the music stopped. I saw Bianca's face when the bill arrived. Tomorrow, the architect would watch his life crumble. Tomorrow, Cole Bennett would pay for Anna Klein. Tomorrow, Elena Vance would be reborn from the ashes. Saturday arrived not with the sun, but wrapped in a cold mist. Yet inside my apartment, the air vibrated with electric energy. I spent the day in monastic silence, preparing my body and mind for the performance of a lifetime. At 6 p.m., I began the ritual. The shower was hot, almost scalding, as if I were scrubbing away the last remnants of the submissive wife Caleb knew. When I got out, I didn't apply makeup on the Elena who cried on the sofa. I applied makeup on the CEO of Vance Wu, sharp contour, deep red lipstick, defined eyes that revealed nothing but mystery, and then the dress. The red silk fabric slid over my skin like a liquid second skin. It was bold, with a backless cut that went down to my lumbar and a side slit that revealed my leg with every step. It wasn't a party dress. It was a declaration of war. I put on stiletto heels, put on a pair of diamond earrings, the only ones I bought for myself with my first million and never wore in front of Caleb, and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. She was dangerous. She was magnificent. David? I touched the invisible earpiece in my ear, hidden by my loose, wavy hair. I'm listening, Elena. His voice came through clear and steady. The team is in position. The restaurant is packed, but 40% of the tables are occupied by our operatives disguised as couples. Anna's mother is in the private security room in the back, watching the monitors. She is ready. I took a deep breath. Let's go. I went down to the lobby. This time, I didn't call a regular Uber. A private driver, hired by my company, was waiting for me in an armored black sedan. I got in the car and watched the city blur past the window. Every street, every building looked like part of a set I was about to tear down. We arrived at L'Etoile at 7:55 p.m. The restaurant was the epitome of pretentious luxury, giant crystal chandeliers, waiters in white gloves, and the smell of old money mixed with black truffles. The valet opened the door for me. When I stepped onto the sidewalk and the red dress caught the entrance light, I felt heads turn. The maitre d', a man named Henri, who now worked for me without knowing it, he thought he answered to a new administrative board, came to greet me. Mrs. Vance? He bowed a little deeper than usual. Your table is ready. They have already arrived. Thank you, Henri. I smiled. Make sure the service is unforgettable. Absolutely, madam. I walked through the hall. The sound of cutlery and low conversations seemed to diminish as I advanced. I felt the weight of the stairs, but I didn't shrink. I grew, and there they were, table 4, the best table in the house, raised on a small platform near the panoramic window. Caleb was sitting at the head, looking like a king on his throne. He was wearing a tailored tuxedo. Beside him, Bianca, in a silver dress that looked cheap next to my red silk, and Nolan, laughing loudly at some unfunny joke, with a glass of whiskey in his hand. They looked so comfortable, so safe in their bubble of impunity. They didn't see the storm coming until the storm stopped right in front of them. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm but projected to cut through their conversation. 3 heads turned. The silence at the table was absolute. Caleb dropped his fork onto his plate with a sharp, metallic clatter. Bianca opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Nolan narrowed his eyes, confused. They expected the sad wife, in baggy clothes and puffy eyes. They expected the victim. They didn't expect the femme fatale. Caleb was the first to recover, but his eyes traveled over my body with a mix of shock and desire. No, wounded possessiveness. "Elena," he choked out, standing up awkwardly. Wow, you are late?" I finished, smiling. "Sorry, traffic was murder." I pulled out the empty chair opposite Caleb, blocking his view of the rest of the room. I sat down, crossing my legs and letting the dresses slit do its work. "No? You look stunning," said Nolan, recovering his predator composure, licking his lips. "I didn't know you had that dress, Elena." "There are a lot of things you don't know about me, Nolan," I replied, staring into his eyes until he looked away. "Bianca, darling, you look tired. Sleepless nights worrying about the real estate market?" Bianca stiffened. "I'm great, Elena. Just surprised." "Caleb said you were fragile." "I was," I admitted, picking up the linen napkin. "But then I realized fragility is a luxury I can't afford. And besides, it's Caleb's birthday, 35 years old, an important date. The year everything changes, right, honey?" Caleb smiled, nervously. He felt it. There was something wrong. The dynamic had changed. He wasn't the tallest man in the room anymore. "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "I'm glad you came. And that you're taking this sportingly. Shows maturity." "Shall we order?" Nolan interrupted, trying to regain control. "I'm starving." Before he could call the waiter, a tall, stern man, one of David's agents, appeared at our side with a dusty bottle of wine. "Special compliment from the manager for table 4, the waiter said, his voice deep. "A courtesy for the birthday boy." He presented the label to Caleb. Caleb squinted to read, "Chateau Stay. Michelle, 2016 vintage." Caleb frowned. "Is that a Washington wine? I prefer French. But, thanks." 2016 was a very interesting year," I said softly, watching the color drain from Caleb's face for a millisecond. "It was the year you lived in Seattle, wasn't it, Caleb? Before we met?" Caleb froze. The glass in his hand stopped in midair. Bianca and Nolan exchanged a quick glance. They didn't know about Seattle. They thought they knew his past, but had Caleb Cole lied to them too? I spent some time there." "For work," he stammered. "Curious," I continued, accepting the glass the waiter poured. The wine was dark red, almost black. "I read recently that 2016 was a year of great losses in Seattle, personal tragedies, people disappearing, but also new beginnings for those who managed to escape. Right?" I raised my glass. "A toast," I proposed. "To the pasts we try to bury, but that insist on coming back to haunt us, and to the future, which will be very different from what any of us imagine." Caleb didn't toast. He looked at the wine like it was poison. "Nolan," sensing the tension but not understanding the reference, forced a loud laugh. "You're very philosophical today, Elena. I like it. A toast to Caleb, to success, to the Civic Center." "To the Civic Center," I repeated, taking a sip. The taste was excellent. "How is the project, by the way? Everything running, legally?" Bianca choked on her water. Caleb slammed his hand on the table, a little too hard. "The project is fine, Elena. Why don't we talk about something else? I don't want to talk about work on my birthday." "Of course," I smiled. "Let's talk about hobbies, travel, Paris, maybe." I heard Paris is beautiful this time of year, especially for couples who need to run away. I mean, relax. Nolan dropped his fork. It clinked on the porcelain plate. Now they knew. The mention of Paris wasn't accidental. I saw panic light up in Bianca's eyes. She looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at me. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, just below his perfect hairline. "What do you know, Elena?" Nolan asked, his voice losing its joviality, becoming the voice of the loan shark he really was. "Me," I made my best innocent face, swirling the wine in the glass. "I don't know anything, Nolan. I'm just the domestic, mediocre wife, remember? The one with no ambition, the one who stays home making soup while the adults evolve. But you know what's funny about mediocre people?" David spoke in my ear. "The screens are ready. The retrospective starts in 10 seconds. Get ready." "What is funny?" Caleb asked, his voice hoarse. I leaned forward, lowering my tone to a conspiratorial whisper. "The funny thing is, because no one looks at them, they see everything." Suddenly, the restaurant lights dimmed. The soft piano music stopped. A spotlight illuminated a white projection screen that descended from the ceiling, right in front of our table. "Oh, look," I clapped, delighted. "The retrospective of your life, honey. Bianca must have prepared this." Bianca looked at the screen, terrified. I didn't prepare anything. Music started playing. Not Happy Birthday, but a slow, melancholic song. Anna Klein's favorite song. Videotape by Radiohead. The first photo appeared on the screen. It wasn't baby Caleb. It wasn't college Caleb. It was a newspaper photo. A grainy headline from Seattle, dated 2016. Police search for missing fiancé after young artist's suicide. And below the headline, Cole Bennett's photo. Caleb's face. The restaurant went silent. Caleb stood up so fast, his chair fell backward with a crash. "What is this?" he screamed. "Turn this off." But no one turned it off. The next image appeared, a bank statement, his Cayman Islands account statement, showing the transfer of $2.5 million from the Civic Center. In high definition. Giant. Nolan went white as paper. Bianca started shaking uncontrollably. "Sit down, Caleb," I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a knife. I wasn't shouting. I was in command. The movie isn't over yet, and I think the next scene is my favorite. Chaos is a curious thing. When well orchestrated, it feels like a symphony. Caleb was standing, trembling, his hands resting on the table to keep from falling, his eyes fixed on the screen where his financial crime shone in high definition. Nolan, the Wall Street shark, was frantically trying to type on his cell phone, probably trying to transfer funds, unaware that David Wu had already frozen every penny he owned the second the first image appeared. Bianca was crying, but it was a silent cry, the cry of someone who knows the party is over. "Who is doing this?" Caleb snarled, looking around the dark restaurant, searching for an invisible enemy. "This is illegal. Nolan, do something." Nolan dropped his phone onto the table with a dull thud. "I can't access the accounts," he whispered, pale as a ghost. "The server is locked. Everything is locked." I took a slow sip of my wine, savoring their panic as if it were the main course. "You look tense," I commented. my calm voice contrasting with their emotional pandemonium. "Caleb, you said you wanted someone who challenged you, someone with an empire." "Well, I think it's time we introduced ourselves properly." I stood up. The movement was fluid, the red silk rustling softly. I walked over to Caleb, invading his personal space. He recoiled as if I were radioactive. "You think I'm just Elena, the wife who makes household budget spreadsheets and translates toaster manuals?" I began, my eyes piercing his. "But did you never wonder how we paid your bills, Caleb? How a junior architect with student debt could maintain a downtown office and drive a Porsche? Did you think it was magic? Or did you think you were so talented that the universe simply rewarded you?" He blinked, confused. His narcissism was fighting against reality. You had an inheritance," he stammered. "From that aunt." I laughed. It was a cold laugh that echoed in the silent hall. "I don't have an aunt, Caleb. I have clients. Clients who pay a lot of money for people like me to solve crises that would destroy companies. I am the co-founder of Vance Wu Crisis Management, and that business trip you thought I didn't have? It was to sign the sale of my company for $21 million. Caleb's jaw dropped, literally. He looked at me as if I had just spoken in dead tongues. Bianca let out an audible gasp. 21 million. Nolan repeated, greed momentarily overcoming fear in his eyes. Exactly, I continued, circling the table like a shark. I am the angel investor who funded your firm. I am the fairy godmother who paid your credit card. I built the stage where you played at being king. And you? You looked at me and called me mediocre. You betrayed me with this. I pointed at Bianca with disdain, bankrupt leech, and conspired with this gambling addict. I pointed at Nolan to steal public money and frame me. Caleb tried to speak, tried to find a defense, but I gave him no room. Oh, and speaking of framing, I raised my hand and signaled the sound booth. DJ, drop the beat. The sound in the restaurant speakers changed. The sad music stopped. In its place, an audio recording began to play. The quality was crystal clear. It was Nolan's voice. "We need a scapegoat, Caleb. If the audit catches the embezzlement, someone has to fall." And then, Caleb's voice, the sound that made the entire restaurant hold its breath. "Use Elena. She's naive. She'll sign anything I put in front of her. Let's plant the money in the apartment. She'll look like the greedy wife who manipulated her husband. I walk away clean, take Bianca, and we go to Paris." The audio echoed off the velvet-lined walls of L'Etoile. Every word was a nail in the coffin of Caleb's reputation. The other diners, the real ones and my operatives, watched in stunned silence. Caleb was destroyed. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw real fear, the fear of a cornered animal. "Elena, this is edited," he shouted, desperate. "It's fake. I would never say that. I love you." "You love me?" I asked, sarcastic. "You love the lifestyle I gave you. You love the mirror I held up for you." But guess what, Caleb? The mirror broke, and the shards are going to cut you. Nolan, realizing the game was over and the recording was his death sentence, tried the physical exit. He shoved his chair back and ran toward the kitchen emergency exit. "I'm not staying here listening to this crazy woman," he yelled, but he didn't take 5 steps. The kitchen doors burst open, and 2 men in black suits, real federal agents, whom David had coordinated to be on site under the guise of an international money laundering investigation, blocked the path. Nolan stopped, panting. He looked back. More agents were entering through the front door. The restaurant was surrounded. "Nolan Pierce," said one of the agents, flashing his badge. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, extortion, and money laundering." "And Mr. Caleb Vance? Or should I say, Cole Bennett?" Caleb backed away until he hit the glass wall. No, you don't understand. She set this up. She's the criminal mastermind. The money was in her apartment. Search her apartment." I walked up to him, standing inches from his sweating face. Ah, the money, I whispered, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. That package Nolan planted in my pantry on Wednesday. I'm sorry to inform you, but it's not there anymore. I handed it to the FBI this morning, along with Nolan's fingerprints on the duct tape, and along with the notebook you stupidly kept inside a hollowed-out book in your office. The notebook where you wrote, "Exit plan." Caleb crumbled. He fell to his knees. The arrogance, the posture of a successful architect, the facade of a superior man, it all evaporated, leaving only an empty, pathetic shell. He looked up at me, with tears in his eyes. "Elena, please, I'm your husband. We can fix this. I can change. Please, don't let them take me." I looked down. I searched for something inside me, some pity, some remnant of the love I felt for him for 5 years. But there was nothing, only the image of Anna Klein falling from that bridge. "You had your chance to change, Cole," I said, using his real name like a curse. "You had 5 years of unconditional love and financial support, and you chose greed, you chose betrayal." I turned my back on him. "Take him away." The agents moved in. The click of the handcuffs on Caleb sounded sweeter than any music. Bianca tried to hide under the table, sobbing, but a female agent pulled her up by her arms. "Bianca," I said, stopping in front of her before they took her. "About that financial advice you gave me. To take the deal without lawyers. I decided to go a different way. I bought your family's debts this morning. The bank sold your mortgages to one of my holdings, which means the penthouse where you live is now mine. You have 24 hours to vacate. Good luck finding a new friend to pay your bills." Bianca screamed, a sharp, hysterical sound as she was dragged out. The restaurant exploded in murmurs. People were filming with their phones. The humiliation was global. Caleb was dragged past me, crying like a child. He looked at me one last time. "Who are you?" he whispered, terrified. I adjusted my red dress, took the last sip of my wine, and smiled. "I am the mediocre woman you left behind, Caleb, and the owner of the restaurant where you just got arrested." The maitre d', Henri, approached at the perfect moment. "Mrs. Vance, shall we serve dessert, or would you prefer to end the evening?" I looked at Caleb's empty chair, at the untouched plate, at the screen that now showed only the Vance Wu Crisis Management logo. "Serve champagne for everyone, Henri," I ordered, my voice echoing with absolute authority. "It's on the house. Today, we celebrate taking out the trash." As the applause started timidly and then grew into a standing ovation, I felt light. There was no sadness. The revenge wasn't bitter. It was sweet, cold, and effervescent. But there was still one thing missing. A final conversation. I walked to the back of the restaurant, where the security room was. I opened the door. An elderly lady with gray hair and tired eyes was sitting in front of the monitors, holding a handkerchief. It was Mrs. Klein, Anna's mother. She looked at me. Her eyes were full of tears, but also of a peace she probably hadn't felt in 6 years. "You got him," she whispered. "We got him," I corrected, taking her hand. "Anna can rest now." Mrs. Klein squeezed my hand. "Thank you. You are an avenging angel, my dear." "I'm not an angel," I replied, looking at the monitor where the police were putting Caleb in the squad car. "I'm just a woman who got tired of apologizing for being strong." The night was far from over. The media would be outside. The world would know the truth. But in that moment, in that small, dark room, the true victory was sealed. I had reclaimed my life, and I had avenged another's. Elena Vance's nightmare was over. The reign of the CEO Empress had just begun. The 48 hours following the arrest at L'Etoile were a blur of camera flashes, official statements, and the constant ringing of phones. But unlike the chaos consuming Caleb's life, my world operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. Vance Wu Crisis Management didn't just clean up crises. We also knew how to create the perfect storm. On Sunday morning, while Caleb woke up in a federal holding cell smelling of cheap disinfectant and despair, the world woke up to my narrative plastered across every screen. The headline of the New York Chronicle, dictated personally by David to a trusted contact, read, "The Architect of Fraud, How a Tech CEO Exposed Her Own Husband's $1 Million Scheme." There was no room for speculation. There was no allegedly. There were only facts, data, and the heroic image of the wife who refused to be a victim. I spent Sunday at the Vance Wu office, watching the dismantling of Nolan and Caleb's paper empire. It was fascinating. Nolan, true to his cowardly nature, lasted exactly 2 hours in the interrogation room before breaking. He gave up everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He gave up the money laundering schemes in Macau, the bribes to city inspectors, and most importantly, he confirmed that the idea to frame me and the plan to forge my social suicide came exclusively from Caleb. Nolan painted Caleb as the sociopathic mastermind, and Caleb, isolated and without access to his illicit funds, had no way to defend himself. On Monday morning, I decided it was time for one last visit. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see reality settle in his eyes. I drove to the Metropolitan Detention Center. The intake process was bureaucratic and cold. I left my purse, my phone, and my wedding ring, which I carried in my pocket just for this moment, in the security locker. When I entered the visiting room, the bulletproof glass separated two worlds. On my side, freedom, the smell of expensive perfume, and the future. On his side, the end. Caleb was brought in handcuffed. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 nights. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by a generic orange jumpsuit. His hair was disheveled, his face covered in stubble, and his eyes red from crying. When he saw me, he didn't show anger. He showed relief, a pathetic, delusional relief. He picked up the intercom phone with shaking hands. "Elena," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank God you came. You need to get me out of here. It's a nightmare. Nolan. Nolan is lying. He's putting everything on me." I sat down calmly, crossing my legs, and picked up the phone. "I know, Caleb. I read Nolan's deposition. It's a fascinating read. He details how you suggested using my fake medical history to claim insanity. He even handed over the emails where you called our marriage the longest and most boring investment of my life." Caleb paled. "He's lying." "Elena, listen. We are married. You can't testify against me. There's spousal privilege." "Oh, Caleb," I sighed, as if explaining math to a child. "Spousal privilege doesn't apply when the spouse is the victim of the crime. And besides, I'm not your main accuser. The state is, the FBI is, and Anna Klein's family is." He flinched at the name. "That's in the past. I didn't kill anyone. You killed her hope. You killed her future. And that, in the eyes of the public opinion I now control, is just as bad as pulling the trigger. But I didn't come here to discuss legal ethics. I came to give you an update on your assets." "My assets?" he asked, a glimmer of hope appearing. "You need to sell the apartment, sell the car, hire the best criminal lawyer, Dershowitz or whoever. Use the money from your company sale. Elena, if you save me, I swear, I'll sign whatever you want. I'll disappear. I'll never bother you again." I looked at him with clinical curiosity. He really thought he still had some leverage. "Caleb, the apartment is already for sale, but the money isn't going to your defense. The money is going to a restitution fund for the Civic Center. The Porsche was seized as evidence of illicit enrichment. And about the lawyers, well, that's funny. I made some calls. Apparently, none of the big defense firms want to touch your case." "Why?" he whispered. "Because Vance Wu Crisis Management is a very, very valuable client to these firms in other corporate cases. And I made it clear that any firm representing Caleb Vance will lose their contract with my company and with every company in the conglomerate that bought me out. You are radioactive, darling. You're going to have to settle for a public defender. an overworked, underpaid public defender who probably saw the news on Sunday and already hates you. Caleb dropped the phone. He rested his forehead against the glass. He started to sob. It wasn't a cry of regret. It was the cry of a spoiled child who had their toy taken away. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, muffled by the glass. "You already won. You already humiliated me. Why take away my defense?" I took the wedding ring from my pocket. The diamond sparkled under the cold, fluorescent prison lights. "Because you didn't just steal my money, Caleb. You stole my time. You looked in my eyes for 5 years and lied. You made me doubt my own intelligence. You made me feel small so you could feel big. This isn't about winning. This is about eradicating a pest." I placed the ring in the small metal drawer that transferred items from one side to the other. But I didn't push it through. I just left it there, visible but untouchable. "Bianca tried to call me this morning." I continued, changing the subject casually. "She was evicted. She wanted to know if I could lend her money for a hotel. Apparently, your elite friends stopped answering her calls when they learned she was an accomplice to a federal crime. She's sleeping on an ex-maid's couch." Caleb raised his head. Hatred replaced the crying. "You are a monster." "Maybe," I agreed, standing up. "But I am a free, rich monster with a clear conscience. Enjoy the public defender, Caleb. The trial is set for 6 months from now. I'll be in the front row. And I promise, I'll wear a very nice dress." I placed the phone back on the hook, cutting off his screams. I turned my back and walked toward the exit. The sound of him banging on the glass, screaming my name, was muffled by the heavy metal door closing behind me. I stepped out of the prison, and the fresh air had never tasted so sweet. David was waiting for me in the car. "How was it?" he asked, as I put on my seatbelt. "It was final," I replied. "He knows it's over." "Great. Because we have work to do. The district attorney wants to meet you. He wants to discuss sentencing. He is proposing a deal for Nolan in exchange for full testimony against Caleb, which would guarantee life imprisonment for your husband without parole. Take it," I said, without hesitation. "Pit Nolan against Caleb. Let them tear each other apart in court. And David." "Yes? I want to create a foundation, named after Anna. A foundation to help women recover from financial fraud and emotional abuse. I want every penny we recover from Caleb to go to that." David smiled in the rearview mirror. "I already prepared the paperwork. It's called the Anna Initiative." I closed my eyes as the car merged into traffic. The storm had passed. Now, all that was left was to clear the rubble and build something new. But before total peace, there would be the spectacle of the trial, and I would ensure that every day of that trial was a lesson the world would never forget. Winter gave way to spring, and with the change of seasons came the event the entire city was waiting for, the state versus Caleb Vance. What started as a white-collar scandal had turned into a media circus of epic proportions. Lines to get a seat in the courtroom gallery began at 4 a.m. There were live broadcast vans from every news channel parked around the block. And at the center of it all, I walked up the marble steps of the courthouse daily, always dressed in impeccable white, a deliberate choice by David to symbolize innocence and truth against the filth of the defendants. The trial lasted 3 excruciating weeks. Caleb's defense strategy, led by an exhausted but stubborn public defender named Mr. Lipton, was predictable and repulsive: victimization. They tried to paint Caleb as a naive artist, a visionary focused on aesthetics who was manipulated by 2 financial predators, Nolan, the loan shark, and me, the controlling and secretive wife. Lipton argued in his opening statement, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Caleb Vance is guilty of being a dreamer, not a thief. He signed papers he didn't read. He trusted friends who betrayed him. He is the true victim of a domestic conspiracy." I saw some jurors nod with sympathy. Caleb, sitting at the defense table, cried silently, wearing a cheap suit that hung loose on his thin shoulders. He was a fantastic actor. For a moment, I felt a knot in my stomach. What if he pulled it off? What if his sociopathic charm worked one more time? But then, the prosecutor called his star witness, Nolan Pierce. Nolan's entrance into the courtroom was the first turning point. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore an orange prison uniform, shackled at the feet. He had aged 20 years in 6 months. His eyes were sunken, his skin gray. He looked at Caleb not with friendship, but with venomous hatred. The cross-examination was brutal. The prosecutor asked, "Mr. Pierce, who conceived the plan to siphon funds from the Civic Center?" Nolan leaned into the microphone, his voice raspy. It was Caleb. He needed to maintain the lifestyle. He was obsessed with outdoing his wife. He said she made him feel financially castrated, even though he didn't know she was wealthy. He wanted money that was his, earned by his smarts, Ty. Caleb's lawyer tried to destroy Nolan's credibility, calling him a pathological liar, but Nolan had the receipts, literally. He explained how Caleb chose the shell company, how Caleb laughed when suggesting the name EV Design to frame Elena. But the most explosive moment came in the second week when I was called to testify. The courtroom went absolutely silent. I walked to the witness stand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. I didn't look at Caleb. I looked at the jury. The defense lawyer tried to be aggressive. "Mrs. Vance, isn't it true that you kept financial secrets from your husband for 5 years? Doesn't that constitute a breach of trust that could have driven him to despair?" I took a deep breath and adjusted the microphone. I kept secrets to protect our intimacy, not to commit crimes. There is a fundamental difference, Mr. Lipton, between privacy and fraud. I hid my wealth so he would love me for who I was. He hid his crimes to fund a life with another woman. The lawyer tried to interrupt me, but I continued. And regarding despair, Caleb wasn't desperate. He was bored. He wanted the thrill of the theft as much as he wanted the money. I heard his voice on the recording. There was no fear. There was pleasure. Caleb, unable to control himself, stood up at the defense table. "You liar!" he screamed, his face red and twisted. "You planned everything. You always wanted to control me. You are a manipulative witch." The judge banged the gavel violently. "Mr. Vance, sit down or you will be removed for contempt." But Caleb didn't stop. The mask had fallen. The weeping victim vanished, revealing the furious narcissist. "She bought this court. She bought the press. Does no one see this? I am the genius here. I designed that civic center. I deserve every penny." The silence that followed his outburst was deafening. The jurors stared at him in horror. He had just confessed his arrogance and his motivation in a single scream. Lipton, his lawyer, covered his face with his hands, knowing the case was lost. Caleb was restrained by 2 bailiffs and forced to sit, panting, his wild eyes fixed on me. I kept my gaze calm, cold. I said nothing. I didn't need to. He had done the work for me. The next day, the prosecution brought out the secret weapon for the sentencing phase, the past. They introduced the Anna Klein case as evidence of a pattern of behavior. Anna's mother took the stand. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom when she described finding her daughter's diary, detailing the lies of Cole Bennett. The defense tried to block the testimony, claiming it was irrelevant, but the judge allowed it. When Mrs. Klein finished, pointing at Caleb and saying, "He didn't just take her money, he took her will to live," I saw Caleb shrink. For the first time, he didn't look furious. He looked small. The jury went out to deliberate on a Friday afternoon. David and I waited in a private room at the courthouse. Time seemed to drag. Every minute was an hour. Bianca, who had taken a lesser plea deal to avoid prison in exchange for community service and restitution, which she had no way to pay, didn't even show up at court. She was working at a diner in the suburbs, trying to rebuild a life from the rubble. Nolan was in the holding cell, praying for leniency. And Caleb? Caleb was alone. Finally, at 4:30 p.m., the bailiff knocked on the door. "They have a verdict." My heart, which I thought was armored, raced. We walked back into the courtroom. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with static electricity. The jury entered. 12 ordinary people who had the power to end this story. The jury foreman, a middle-aged man with glasses, held a shaking paper. The judge asked Caleb to stand. He did, his legs wobbly, held up by Lipton. "In the case of the People versus Caleb Vance," read the foreman, "how does the defendant plead to the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud?" "Guilty," said the foreman. A murmur ran through the room. "To the charge of money laundering." "Guilty." "To the charge of embezzlement of public funds?" "Guilty." There were 12 counts, 12 guilties. With every word, Caleb seemed to take a physical punch. By the end, he was hunched over, sobbing openly, no longer the manipulative cry, but the ugly, visceral cry of the end. But the judge wasn't finished yet. He looked at Caleb over his glasses. "Mr. Vance, given the gravity of your crimes, the cruelty demonstrated against your wife, and the pattern of predation established by the prior case in Seattle, I have decided to revoke your bail immediately. Sentencing will be handed down in 2 weeks. Take him away." As the officers handcuffed Caleb, he turned to the gallery. He looked for someone, maybe Bianca, maybe Nolan, but there was no one. His eyes found mine. I didn't smile, I didn't wave. I just watched him be led through the side door, the same door where convicts enter and forgotten memories leave. I walked out of the courthouse into a wall of flashes. Reporters shouted my name. "Mrs. Vance, Mrs. Vance, how does it feel? Has justice been served?" David cleared a path for me to the car. I got in, shutting the door against the noise. The silence of the armored car was a sanctuary. "Is it over?" I asked, looking at my hands. David started the engine. "The battle is over, Elena, but the war for your new life starts now. We have the sentencing reading in 2 weeks, and then, the world is yours." I rested my head against the cold window glass. I had won, but as I looked at the city, I realized that victory didn't bring the euphoria I expected. It brought peace, a quiet, deep peace. The storm had passed, and the air was clean. I was ready to build upon the ruins. The day of the sentencing arrived like an execution day. The courtroom was more crowded than during the trial. There was a bloodlust in the air, a collective need to see the architect of fraud pay the bill. I sat in the front row, dressed no longer in white, but in navy blue, the color of authority, the color of Vance Wu. David was beside me, holding a thick folder containing the details of Caleb's asset liquidation. When the judge entered, the silence was instant. Caleb was brought in. He didn't look at anyone. He looked at his own feet, dragging his chains. He looked like a specter, a shadow of the man who once zipped up an Italian leather suitcase and told me I lacked ambition. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked at the papers for a long moment before speaking. "Caleb Vance, also known as Cole Bennett," the judge's voice echoed in the vaulted hall. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case of such moral duplicity. You not only defrauded the government and taxpayers of millions of dollars, you used the intimate trust of 2 women to fund your greed. You are a predator who uses affection as a weapon." The judge paused. I saw Caleb's shoulders shake. "On the charge of conspiracy and wire fraud, I sentence you to 15 years. On the charge of money laundering, 10 years. On the embezzlement of public funds, 5 years. The sentences are to be served consecutively. Caleb Vance, you are sentenced to a total of 30 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. You will only be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. The courtroom exploded. 30 years. Caleb would be 65 when he saw freedom again. His youth, his career, his new phase. It was all over. He tried to scream, tried to stand up, but his legs failed. He had to be held up by the officers. He looked at me, eyes wide with terror. Elena, don't let them. 30 years. I'll die in there. I kept my face impassive. 30 years was a fair price. It was 1 year for every million he tried to steal, and a bonus for Anna's life. The judge continued. As for the co-conspirators, Nolan Pierce, due to his substantial cooperation, his sentence is reduced to 8 years in prison, followed by a lifetime ban from acting in any capacity in the financial or banking sector. Nolan lowered his head. 8 years was an eternity for a man used to 5-star hotels, but it was better than 30. His career, however, was dead. He would never touch other people's money again. And as for Bianca Dubois, said the judge, with disdain. Her participation was motivated by opportunism, but her complicity is undeniable. The defendant is sentenced to 3 years of probation, 2,000 hours of community service, and full financial restitution of any benefits obtained. Since the defendant has declared bankruptcy, her remaining assets will be liquidated immediately. The gavel banged, bang. The final sound. The hearing was over. As the crowd dispersed, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Anna's mother. 30 years, she whispered, smiling through tears. He will never hurt anyone again. Never again, I confirmed. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon light. But my day wasn't over. There was one last stop. The auction. As part of the liquidation of Caleb's assets to pay restitution to the Civic Center, the government was auctioning off everything in his name. The event was taking place in a warehouse at the port. I didn't need to go. I had the money to buy all that stuff 1,000 times over, but I needed to see. I entered the warehouse quietly. There were bargain hunters, onlookers, and journalists. I saw his items displayed like cheap merchandise. His exclusive in wine collection, his Italian suits, his watches, and, in the center, the architectural models he loved so much. The auctioneer started the bidding. Lot 45, award-winning model of Project Horizon. Starting bid $100. No one raised their hand. Caleb's genius was worthless without the marketing I paid for. $50? The auctioneer tried. Silence. I felt a twinge of pity, not for him, but for the waste of potential. Caleb had talent, yes, but he loved the shortcut more than the work. In the end, an architecture student bought the model for $20, probably to reuse the materials. Then came Lot 89, the Rolex Submariner watch I gave him, the watch he checked when he said he was leaving me. Starting bid $5,000, said the auctioneer. I raised my paddle. $15,000, said a voice in the back. I looked. It was a businessman, arrogant, looking like the kind of person Caleb aspired to be. I could cover the bid. I could buy the watch and smash it with a hammer. But then, I lowered my paddle. I didn't want the watch. I didn't want anything that had touched his skin. I let the man buy it. Let him inherit the bad luck of that object. The money would go to charity anyway. I left the auction empty-handed, but with a full soul. I drove to my old apartment. The apartment Caleb wanted to sell. Now it was legally mine again, free of any claim from him. I entered. The place was silent. The furniture was still there, the sofa where we watched TV, the table where we ate dinner, but the air was different. It was still. David? I called on the phone. Send the team. Are you sure, Elena? He asked. Absolutely. I want everything out. Donate the furniture to homeless shelters. Burn his clothes. Sell the artwork he chose and donate it to the Anna Initiative. I want the walls bare. I want to start from scratch. I spent the afternoon supervising the moving crew. I watched the sofa being taken away. I watched the bed where we slept for 5 years, being dismantled. With every piece that left, I felt a weight lifting from my chest. By 6 p.m., the apartment was empty. Just the hardwood floors and the large windows overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the white walls orange and gold. I stood alone in the center of the empty room. My voice echoed when I spoke. I am Elena Vance, and this is my home. There were no ghosts here, not anymore. Caleb's ghost was locked in a concrete cell miles away. Anna's ghost was at peace. And me? I was just starting to draw the blueprint of my new life. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Vance? This is the editor from Simon & Schuster. We followed the trial. Your story is inspiring. We want to buy the rights for a book, and maybe a movie. I smiled at the sunset. Let's talk, I replied. But I'm warning you now, the price has gone up. I'm not a secret angel investor anymore. I'm the protagonist, and protagonists are expensive. I hung up the phone and walked to the balcony. The evening breeze hit my face. I took a deep breath. It smelled like victory. But the story wasn't completely over yet. There was one last loose end. Bianca. The friend who advised me to give up. I knew where she was. And I had one last gift for her. Not of revenge, but of cruel mercy. Because the true empress doesn't just destroy her enemies, she decides how they will survive in the ruins. The morning after the auction, I drove my car to the outskirts of the city. The GPS guided me through neighborhoods Caleb didn't even know existed, places where architecture wasn't about aesthetics, but survival. I stopped in front of a diner called Danny's Diner. The neon sign was broken, flickering erratically, and the smell of stale grease escaped through the door whenever a customer entered. This was it. Bianca Dubois, new stage. I put on my sunglasses and went inside. The place was half empty, occupied by tired truckers and locals drinking cheap coffee. I sat in a booth in the corner, away from the dirty window. I waited, and then I saw her. Bianca came out of the kitchen carrying a heavy tray of pancake plates. The silver dress and jewelry were gone, replaced by a brown polyester uniform 2 sizes too big for her and white orthopedic shoes. Her blonde hair, once impeccably blow-dried in expensive salons, was tied back in a greasy, practical ponytail. She looked 10 years older. She served a nearby table, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes when a customer made a rude comment. When she turned and saw me, the tray trembled in her hands. For a second, I thought she was going to drop everything, but the survival instinct spoke louder. If she broke the plates, it would come out of her paycheck. She set the tray on the counter and walked over to me, wiping her hands on her dirty apron. "What do you want?" she hissed, looking around to see if the manager was watching. "Came to see the show. Came to laugh." "Hello to you too, Bianca," I replied, taking off my sunglasses. "Is the service here always this hostile, or am I special?" "Go to hell, Elena. I'm working. If my boss sees me talking to you—" "Don't worry," I interrupted, placing a $100 bill on the table. "I'm a paying customer. I want a coffee." "Black." Bianca looked at the bill. It was probably more than she made in 2 days. Greed fought pride in her eyes, and as always, greed won. She went to get the coffee. When she returned, she set the cup in front of me with a dull thud. "Drink it and leave," she said. "I didn't come here to laugh, Bianca," I said, taking a sip of the terrible coffee. "I came here to give you a gift. I don't want anything from you." "Oh, you'll want this." I pulled a white envelope from my Hermes bag and slid it across the ketchup-stained table. Bianca hesitated, but curiosity got the better of her. She opened the envelope. Inside was an elegant business card and a cashier's check. She read the card. "Anna Initiative Foundation. Legal support for women in financial crisis?" She read aloud, confused. "What is this?" "It's my new project," I explained calmly. "A foundation dedicated to helping fraud victims. But we also have an arm that helps women who made catastrophic financial decisions get back on their feet legally. The check is to pay for a decent bankruptcy lawyer, Bianca. Not that public butcher you're using. This will help you clear your name and maybe, in a few years, have the credit to rent a decent apartment without needing to sleep on anyone's couch. Bianca looked at the check, then at me. Her eyes filled with tears of humiliation. If I had screamed at her, she could have defended herself with anger. But charity, pity coming from the woman she tried to destroy? That was unbearable. It confirmed she was so far beneath me that she didn't even deserve my hatred, only my pity. Why? She asked, her voice shaking. Because you gave me valuable advice that day at the restaurant, I said, standing up. You told me to be pragmatic. You are a loose end, Bianca, and I like my ends tied. Use the money, or tear it up. I don't care. Either way, this is the last time you'll see me. I left the diner without looking back. I heard the muffled sound of her crying as the door closed. It was the final sound of my past being left behind. 2 years have passed since that day. Time has a funny way of healing, but also of transforming. The scar Caleb left hasn't disappeared, but it has become a war mark, a constant reminder of my own strength. Today, I am in the dressing room of the Metropolitan Opera House. The lighted mirror reflects a woman that the Elena Vance of 2 years ago would barely recognize. Her hair is shorter, an asymmetrical, modern cut. The dress isn't red, but gold, shining like armor made of light. Outside, 3,000 people are waiting, not to hear about architecture or scandals, but to hear the CEO of Vance Wu and founder of the Anna Initiative launch her best-selling memoir, The Revenge Algorithm: How I Hacked My Own Life. David enters the dressing room. He has changed too. The reclusive hacker now wears Armani suits, though he still keeps the nervous habit of checking his phone every 30 seconds. The house is full, Elena, he says, smiling. We have senators, tech CEOs, and ironically, the new FBI director in the front row. The FBI director? I laughed. The one who threatened me with an obstruction of justice charge because I burned the fake bank statements in the fireplace? The very one. Now he wants a partnership with your company to track cryptocurrency fraud. The world turns, boss. It turns indeed. David hesitates for a moment. He pulls a letter from his inner jacket pocket. The envelope is cheap. The paper is rough. It has no stamp, as it was delivered through the prison system. Arrived this morning, he says, from Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. I look at the letter, Caleb's handwriting, pointy, arrogant, but now shaky. Do you want me to shred it? David asks. I reach out. No, let me see. I open the envelope. The letter is short. Elena, I saw you on TV this morning. You look happy. In here, the days are all gray. I think a lot about our apartment. I think a lot about how I thought I owned the world. The chaplain says I need to find forgiveness, but I can only find envy. You won, Elena, not just in court. You won at life. And I am just a footnote in your biography. I hope this knowledge keeps you warm at night, because the cold in here never goes away. Cole. I read the words twice. He still tries, even between the lines, to make me feel guilty for his suffering. He is still the same narcissist, focused on how he feels, on how he suffers. But the magic is gone. The words have no power. They are just ink on cheap paper. What does he say? David asks. I walk to the vanity, pick up my gold lighter, and light the corner of the letter. I hold the paper as the flame consumes Caleb's words, turning envy and cold into black ash that falls into the metal trash can. Nothing important, I reply, watching the last ember die. Just an old fan sending regards. David smiles. Are you ready? I was born ready. We leave the dressing room. The long corridor leads to the stage. I can hear the buzz of the crowd, the sound of expectation. I think of Anna Klein. I think of how she never got this chance. I think of all the women who wrote to me in the last 2 years, saying my story saved them from men like Caleb. I am no longer a victim. I am no longer a betrayed wife. I am a survivor who learned to bite back. The curtains open. The spotlight blinds me for a second, but I don't blink. I walk to the center of the stage. The applause is deafening, a physical wave of approval and power. I raise my hand, and silence falls instantly. I approach the microphone. "Good evening," my voice echoes, steady, clear, unbreakable. My name is Elena Vance, and this is the story of how I turned a $21 million betrayal into my greatest asset. The audience leans forward, and I begin to speak, not with bitterness, but with the authority of someone who wrote their own happy ending with the blood of their enemies. The lights of the opera house went out, but the light inside me remained lit. The book launch was a resounding success, but as the car glided through the silent streets of the early morning, I knew that fame was just a tool. The real work happened in the shadows, where I always operated best. I arrived at my new penthouse, not the apartment where I was betrayed, but a new space, overlooking the river, bought with the profits from the book and not with secrets. David was in the living room, surrounded by monitors. The Anna Initiative wasn't just a charity foundation. It was a private intelligence agency dedicated to protecting women. "We have a code red, Elena," said David, without taking his eyes off the screen. "Remember that young tech heiress in San Francisco? Sarah? Her fiancé just tried to transfer her startup's intellectual property to a holding company in Panama." I took off my high heels and walked to the desk. The gold dress rustled. I looked at the data. It was the same pattern. Caleb's same modus operandi. The isolation, the fake adoration, the sneaky financial movement. Sarah was about to lose everything, just like Anna lost, just like I almost lost. But Sarah had something we didn't have. She had me. "Block the transfer," I ordered. "And send the dossier to her phone right now. Wake her up." "Done," replied David, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "The fiancé is at the airport. He'll try to run when the card is declined. Have airport security intercept him. I know the head of security there. Tell him it's a favor for Elena Vance." David smiled. "The predator just became the prey. Sarah is safe." I took a deep breath, feeling satisfaction fill my lungs. It wasn't the same wild adrenaline as watching Caleb get arrested. It was something calmer, more sustainable. It was the feeling of justice. I walked to the balcony. The city glowed below me, an ocean of lights and possibilities. I thought about everything that happened. I thought about the pain of that first morning, the shock of hearing the suitcase zipper, the humiliation of being called mediocre. That pain could have destroyed me. It destroyed the old Elena. But the woman who emerged from the flames was unbreakable. I leaned on the glass railing and looked at my reflection. I no longer saw the naive wife. I saw the architect of my own life. Caleb wanted to build buildings. I built a legacy. He wanted to leave a mark on the skyline. I left a mark on history. "Elena?" David appeared at the balcony door. Sarah called. "She's crying, but she's grateful. She asked how she can repay us." I smiled. "Tell her the payment is simple. When she recovers, she must help another woman. That's how the chain works." David nodded and went back inside. I was left alone with the night. And now, I speak directly to you. Yes, you who have followed this journey from the first gasp of shock to this moment of triumph. Maybe you are in a relationship where you feel small. Maybe you are being underestimated at work. Maybe someone has made you believe that your voice doesn't matter, that your ambition is dangerous, or that you should settle for crumbs of affection. Look at me. Look at what I did. They tried to steal my fortune, my dignity, and my sanity. It's about demanding from the universe the balance that was denied to you. I am Elena Vance. I was the betrayed wife, the black widow, the ruthless CEO, and the savior. But above all, I am living proof that the best answer to those who say you are nothing is to become everything. The sun is rising on the horizon, a new day, a new hunt, and I will be watching. Because as long as there are wolves in sheep's clothing, there will be women like me, ready to show them who really has the sharp teeth. The end. They thought I was the weak link, but they forgot the most basic rule of nature. Nothing is more dangerous than a woman who has been forced to rebuild herself. Do not accept the mediocrity they project onto you. Do not accept the lies. Check the accounts. Ask the hard questions. And if you find that you are sleeping with the enemy, do not cry. Do not despair. Plan. Revenge isn't about hate. It's about respect.